قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran, and what He says is the truth. In the chapter of al-Anfal, chapter 8, verse 22, Allah says, إِنَّ شَرَّ الدَّوَابِّ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ الصُّمُّ الْبُكْمُ الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this blessed verse, He says that the most evil, meaning the worst of creations, of the creations of Allah, are those that neither speak nor hear. Those are the ones that do not understand, that do not think, that do not contemplate. صدق الله العلي العظيم. آمنا بالله. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Knowledge and understanding are important parts of our lives. Every day we wake up in the morning, our parents send us to school, or we go to school, to university, or we go to work and we teach people knowledge. We recognize the importance of knowledge in our lives. We recognize that without knowledge, there are heights in the human condition that we cannot reach. There are positions as employees that we cannot reach. There are places as scholars in universities that we cannot become if we don't gain more knowledge. And that knowledge is contingent upon us researching, upon us continuously searching for truths. But we can't do that without one essential item, and that is the intellect. The intellect truly has become a conundrum for many, many years and many centuries amongst humanity, specifically those who are scholars. In trying to understand the human condition, one cannot skip the intellect. You see, what we hear quite often is that, brother, you should have faith. You should have faith in Allah. You shouldn't question. Growing up, many of us back home, for those of us who are old enough to be back home, many of us back home, when we ask a question, we ask it with a little humility. We ask it with a little fear. We ask it with a little bit of hesitation. And the reason why we do that is because we're afraid of being embarrassed by those around us. Because all too often what tends to happen is that when we ask a question, someone says, شنو هذا السؤال? What kind of question is this? You should know the answer to such a question. معقولة ما تعرف الجواب على هذا السؤال؟ يعني فالسؤال سخيف. This is such a silly question. How could you ask it? While we know that the only way that we can gain knowledge is by asking. So what is it that is expected of me? Should I ask or shouldn't I ask? Should I stop my intellect from working, from continuously trying to find the truths? Or should I just set it aside and just depend on blind faith? Why? Because my parents told me to. Because my uncle told me to. Because my aunt told me to. Or because someone who is religious told me to. And so when I ask the question of, does God exist? I say, I know it's a silly question and I know He exists, but is there a way to prove that He exists? Right? This is a very, very common question and a very common means of asking the question that I face every day, every community I go to. Sheikhna, I know that I shouldn't be asking this question, apologetically, right? While in reality, they shouldn't be apologetic about anything. So this is what we want to do today. We want to do a couple of things. The first thing we want to do is we want to define the intellect according to Western culture and Western scholarship. We also want to look at the intellect through a contemplative manner. We want to see how far the intellect can really take us. What realities can we reach if we just use our intellect, simple, unadulterated intellect? And then what we want to do is we want to see what Islam tells us. Does Islam reflect exactly what my intellect has allowed me to reach in terms of truths? Or is it in opposition? Because you see, the apologetic nature of asking such questions means that there's a fear that Islam itself might be in contradiction with the intellect. And then finally, the third thing we want to do is we want to give it a practical use of the knowledge that we just gained. Because there's no use in just gaining knowledge for the sake of theory, right? It has to have a practicality to it. If I don't look at what the West teaches me, what my intellect teaches me, what Islam teaches me, and I put it all together and see how it applies to my everyday life, then there are going to be parts of my life and my understanding that are missing, right? And so let's get started. So the first thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to define the intellect in accordance with Western scholarship. Now, the intellect is defined as the mind that is used to gain understanding. It is also defined as the ability to think, and it is defined as the ability to understand and the ability to contemplate in order to reach certain truths or information. Very good? We'll talk about the definition of the intellect once we get to the Islamic perspective. Now, I recognize from a rational standpoint, just like I said in the introduction to this lecture, that there is an importance to me thinking, because I know that, for example, if I'm not asking questions in school, then most likely I'm not going to be the best student, right? Because obvious knowledge is not obvious to everybody from birth. Otherwise, we'd all know everything from once we were born, right? And we know that's not the case. Which means that we have to go through a process of learning, right? We have to develop our knowledge. And that happens by collecting information. This is red, this is blue, this is the number 1, this is the number 2, right? This is tall, this is short, this is heavy, this is light, right? And in those stages, as I'm gaining knowledge, then what I do is I move on to another stage where I start comparing that knowledge, right? Sheikh al-Muzaffar, he mentions this, and he mentions this purely from an observational, empirical point of view in his book of logic, Mantiq al-Muzaffar. He mentions these stages. He says the first stage is the stage of collecting knowledge. The second stage is the stage of comparing the knowledge. The third stage is the stage of realizing things that are imagined, untangible things. For example, realizing my feelings, right? Happiness, sadness, right? Elation, sorrow, right? Love, hate, correct? And then the fourth stage of learning is actually a very important stage. That's the stage where I bring everything together, where I start to analyze everything, and I start to author solutions for common problems, right? So I understand then that the process of learning itself is contingent upon me using my intellect. It is dependent upon me asking questions and me collecting information and then using that information to analyze and to compare. And then that when I'm faced with a problem, I can go to my prior knowledge, right? I can look into that archive of information and I can deduce, right? And I can use results to form conclusions, right? And so I understand then that the intellect essentially, rationally, has to be used. I have to contemplate, I have to think, I have to go through these stages. Now that I realize this, let's think together. One of the most important questions that is asked, and I mentioned a few minutes ago where, some brothers and sisters, they come to me, they say, Sheikh, now I know it's a silly question, right? But can you really prove God? Right? Let's see how far the intellect can take us without looking at the Holy Quran. Because many of us, when we're asked that question, what do we say? Our parents tell us, Baba, look at the tree. My dear son, look at the tree. Right? My dear daughter, look at the fish. Look at the birds in the sky, right? As though that if I see the bird or I see the tree or I see the sun, that means, khalas, that's it, it's done, right? But where's the process right? There has to be an intellectual process, reasoning, deduction, right? It's not that they're wrong, they're totally right. But there are introductions, right? There's a major premise and a minor premise for me to get to that conclusion that they led me to. They went right to the conclusion, right? So this is what we want to do. Let's take a look at that question and let's ask ourselves, right? Because we know ourselves better than anybody else, right? So I'm going to ask myself, am I the creator? So I look deep within myself. I'm introspective, right? I contemplate. I look within myself and I say, you know what? I realize I'm in need. I'm in need of water. I'm in need of food. I'm in need of AC. I'm in need of friendship. I'm in need of kindness, right? I'm in need of love, right? This tells me what? That I'm in need. I know that I'm limited because I have these needs, right? I'm limited by my power. I'm limited by my speed. I'm limited by my eyesight. I'm limited by my intellectual capacity. I'm limited by the knowledge that I have. That if I don't gain and read more and more every day, then what will happen? I won't gain any more information. I'll be stagnant. I'll be exactly where I am. I won't progress, right? So I understand then that I am limited. So I say, okay, so it can't be me that created the world. So I look at whom? A creator. My parents created me. So maybe they know more than I do. But I find that the same limitations exist in them. I look at their parents. They have the same limitations. Their parents have the same limitations. I find that all of humanity is limited then. All of humanity is limited. It can't be humans that created this world. So I say to myself, okay, what about their surroundings? Well, everything is limited, right? The earth is limited, ground is limited by bodies of water, right? The earth is limited by its atmosphere. The planets are limited by their orbits, right? So everything really is limited that I see before me. So it couldn't be that those things created the world. So I said, you know what? Let me think a little deeper. Let me put my thinking cap on. So I start thinking deeper. And I think to myself, why don't I look at creators? What characteristics do they possess? I know, for example, that an engineer, when he creates an engine, he's not limited by that one engine that he creates. He can create one engine, two engines, 3, 4, 5, right? I know that a baker is not limited by the cookies that he or she bakes, right? They can make 1 cookie, 2 cookies, 3 cookies. They can make chocolate chip cookies. They can make white chocolate macadamia cookies. They can make oatmeal raisin cookies, right? They're not limited by what they make. Also, I find that a painter is not limited by his paintings. He can make as many paintings as he wants, right? So then I want to get what we call in Arabic al-kubra, meaning I want to get an overall concept that I can use as part of my proof when I'm trying to deduce, right? So I think to myself, okay, I can safely say then that a creator is not limited by his creation, right? I can safely conclude that, correct? So based on that, I'll say, all right, so let's look at this limited world. Let's look at everything in this universe, this world of limitation. The creator of the world of limitation, the supreme creator, before whom there is no other creator. He's not limited by his creation, right? Isn't that what we said? Dr. Hassan, isn't that what we said? Right. So if that's the case, then that means that is the creator of the limited world unlimited or is he limited? He has to be unlimited. Ahsan, Brother Hassan. Now, not only did we prove that a creator exists, we also proved a very important characteristic of the creator of all creators, and that is that he is unlimited. And now we can start to come up with realities and truths that advanced philosophers for centuries have been pondering over. If one is unlimited, does he have any flaws? Hassan, does he have any flaws? If you're unlimited, you have no flaws. Because you have no limitations, and a flaw is a limitation. If you're unflawed, what does that mean? What's the best way to describe something or someone that is unflawed? Perfect, Ahsan. So if he's perfect, does he make any mistakes? That means he's all-knowing, right? That means not only does he know how to create things in this world, he knows how to sustain them, right? Not only does He know when to create things, He knows when to end them. And if He's unlimited, that means He neither has a beginning nor does He have an end. يا حيا قبل كل حي ويا حيا بعد كل حي ويا حيا حين لا حي. O He who is alive before all things, during all things, and after all things, when all things cease to exist. Look at how this simple proof allowed us intellectually to come to a reality that philosophers have pondered over for centuries. Right? And what else can we conclude from this? And I want you to focus with me here. This is really important. Because I want you to use this proof to teach your kids. And I want the youth who are watching, like Brother Muhammad, right, to pay attention so that they can do what? They can use that when their friends ask them, right? So if He's all perfect, then that means He's all wise, right? Then that means He's all just, correct? That means He's all purposeful, right? So the question that we all ponder all of our lives, what's my purpose in life? Right? And I look for, the university to give me my purpose because I'm undeclared in my major, right? I look for university to give me my purpose. I look for my parents to give me my purpose. I look for my teachers to give me my purpose. I look for my friends to give me my purpose. So I hang out with this crowd and that crowd and the other crowd just to find my purpose in life, to find a place where I fit. But if Allah's all purposeful, then that means first and foremost, He created me for one, a purpose. And if Allah is all perfect and He chose for me to exist, then He gives me my worth. Then I am worthy because Allah chose for me to exist. And my life is not owned by me, it is owned by Him because He is the creator beyond whom there is no other creator, right? So I shouldn't be looking for friends to give me my worth or my purpose. I shouldn't be looking for cliques in school or in the cafeteria or at work, right? I shouldn't be looking up to presidents or senators or premiers or whomever for acceptance, right? I should be comfortable in knowing that the most perfect creator of all is the one who created me. And that's enough. My purpose and my worth is from Him, from no one else. Notice I haven't used the Quran yet. Did I use the Quran to prove all of this? No. Because Allah placed this in me, this ability to reach Him through my intellect. So what does Islam tell me about al-aql? Sallu ala Muhammad wa Before that, we didn't answer the question of what's the purpose, right? We understand that there has to be a purpose, but we didn't understand what the purpose is. And I'll give you a simple example. Allah wouldn't make it hard, by the way. Allah wouldn't make it hard for humanity. Otherwise it would be cruel. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all perfect, so He can't be cruel because He's all just, right? So what is my purpose? My parents brought me to this world, right? Our parents brought us to this world. Now we go through life always trying to please our parents. We always want them to be happy with us. We always want to make them proud. Even when they're not around, what do we say? Ya Allah, I wish my dad was here to see me. Ya Allah, my mom would be so proud right now if she saw my son and how well he's been raised. Right? We always seek approval from our parents. Why? Because they have a great right upon us. You know what that is? That they brought us to this world. So we have a sense of obligation towards them. Their right upon us is to be obedient, to be kind. Right? And innately within us, we have a need to please them. Now imagine, He who created them and our grandparents and all of humanity and all of creation, does He not have the greatest right upon us? Intellectually speaking. Does He not have the greatest right upon you and me and all of humanity? And what is that greatest right? That greatest right is to be obedient to Him, to please Him, to make Him proud. And first and foremost, what does that all mean? That means just as I'm thankful for my mom and thankful for my dad, and I manifest that thanks and that gratitude through my actions, then I would do the exact same thing with my Lord, with my Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The most important right Allah has upon me is to let Him know that I know Him and that I am thankful that He chose for me to exist. And so all I do is I try to please Him, to make Him proud of me by asking, oh Allah, what do you want from me? And how can I please you? Just like I would go to my parents and say, Yumma, my mom, dear mom, tell me what I can do to please you. Right? Dear dad, what can I do to please you? We go through our lives trying to please our parents, right? But we forget, He who gave us our parents is Allah Almighty. I should go through life saying, oh Allah, guide me to please you. Oh Allah, let me show you my gratitude. Guide me. Right? Now I know that Allah is all perfect. I know that Allah is all knowing. I know that Allah is all purposeful. So I make sure that I have His akhlaq. So I'm all purposeful. Meaning I strive to have purpose in everything that I do, to please Him with everything that I do. I strive to be wise because He is all wise, which means I have to strive to gain knowledge, right? And benefit from every experience that I go through, right? I strive to show my appreciation of all of His creations because He deemed them worthy of existing. Therefore, I must show gratitude for Him creating every single one of not only the community, but everybody outside my community. Every human being, whether Hindu or Sikh, whether Christian or Jew, right? Think about it. If Allah chose for them to exist, then they are worthy of existing. And they are worthy of me getting to know. Make sense? And so my dedication and my sincerity to Allah would be reflected in how sincere I am with you, how kind I am to you, right? And how kind you are to me. The less kind you are to me, the less dedicated you are to me, the less iman you have in your heart. It's such a beautiful formula. And we reached it how? Through simple intellectual reasoning. So Islam says something really beautiful. There's this beautiful hadith in the first book of hadith that we have called Al-Kafi. Now, in the very first book of Al-Kafi, the very first book is called Kitabul Aql, the book of the intellect. And the very first hadith that it starts off with is this beautiful hadith. The hadith is narrated by way of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayh, and he narrates it or reports it by way of the Messenger of Allah, sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He says, لَمَّا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْعَقْلِ. When Allah first created the intellect, استنطقه. He gave it the ability to speak and think and rationalize. فَقَالَ لَهُ أَقْبِلْ فَأَقْبَلْ وَقَالَ لَهُ أَدْبِرْ فَأَدْبَرْ. It's exactly like, when you have a child and they wear beautiful clothes and you tell them, Ashulif, turn around, let me take a look at you. Oh, you're so beautiful, right? This is what Allah is doing with the intellect. أقبل فأقبل أدبر فأدبر. Go forward, come back, let me take a good look at you. He says, وعزتي وجلالي. By my majesty and my grandeur. ما خلقت خلقا أحب إلي منك. I did not create a creation that is more beloved to me than you, O intellect. وما أكملتك إلا في من أحب. And neither did I complete you except in those whom I love. And neither did I complete you, O intellect, except in those whom I love. فإياك آمر, for it is you that I command. وإياك أنهى, and it is you that I prohibit and forbid. وإياك أعاقب, and it is you that I punish. وإياك أثيب, and it is you that I reward. So how important is the intellect in Islam? How important is the intellect in Islam? Now let's define al-aql. No one defines the aql, the intellect, more beautifully than Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayhi. He says, al-aqlu ma ubida bihi ar-Rahman waktusiba bihi al-jinan. He says the intellect is that with which one worships Allah and with which he gains heaven and paradise. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, what did we do in the first part of the lecture? Did we not reach the reality of Allah's existence? Right? Did we not reach the reality that Allah is worthy of worship and worthy of our gratitude, and that we have to make Him proud and be obedient. مَا عُبِدَ بِهِ الرَّحْمَنِ وَاكْتُسِبَ بِهِ الْجِنَانِ. It is that with which you worship Allah, showing Him your gratitude, right? And it is that with which you gain heaven, paradise. Imam Ali salamullah alayhi also says something beautiful. In the first sermon in Nahj al-Balagha, awwal khutbah, in the second paragraph, he says, أَوَّلُ الدِّينِ مَعْرِفَتُهُ. He says, the first of religion is to know Him. So we may ask, how can I know Allah? What's the best way of knowing Allah? He says, وَكَمَالُ مَعْرِفَتِهِ التَّصْدِيقُ بِهِ. He says, the best way to know Allah is to prove His existence. What did we do? Through our intellect. We proved His existence. Then he says, وَكَمَالُ التَّصْدِيقِ بِهِ تَوْحِيدُهُ. He says, and the best way, because we're going to ask, what's the best way to prove Allah? He says, the best way to prove Allah is to prove His uniqueness. That's what Tawheed is. Right? Now many of us, we recite Surah Al-Ikhlas or Tawheed, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Many of us, we learn that Ahad means one. Ahad doesn't mean one. Ahad means unique, because He's the unlimited. And then he says, وَكَمَالُ تَوْحِيدِهِ. Because we're going to ask, what's the best way of having Tawheed? The Imam answers. Notice what the Imam is doing. He's telling us, look, how important it is for you to ask these questions. And he's literally reading our minds. It's so beautiful how he speaks to our intellects. He says, وَكَمَالُ تَوْحِيدِهِ الْإِخْلَاصُ لَهُ. He says, and the best, most perfect way of having Tawheed is to have sincerity to Him alone. Sincerity in gratitude, sincerity in obedience, sincerity in knowing that He created me and that everything that I do is for Him. Not for my friends, not for my colleagues at work, not for saving face, not for showing how great Muslims are, for Allah. I do it for Allah alone, right? For Allah alone, for no one else. I'm kind to non-Muslims because I have to be kind to them. Allah is kind to them. Right? It's an intellectual necessity to be kind to everyone. I'm respectful to them. Why? Because Allah is respectful to them. He gives them chances and opportunities to reach Him and to know Him. He puts people in their lives. He shows them through their intellect that good values are good for them to follow. And so we find, even if they're non-Muslim, we find them being kind to animals. We find them being kind to each other. We find them with organizations such as Doctors Without Borders, for example. Right? These human values are innate within us. But once we realize intellectually why it is they're innate and how it is that we can come to the conclusion that they're important for our lives, then and only then can we truly appreciate Allah Almighty. You know, what is the name of that Surah Al-Tawheed? What's the name in the Quran for it? Surah Al-Ikhlas. It's the chapter of sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what Amir al-Mu'mineen was talking about. This is Islam. Islam is about sincerity to Allah Almighty. Now I promised you we'd give this a practical spin at the end, right? So I understand how I can apply it. Now, we've already applied it in several places, right? We've applied it in that we look at people around us. Here in the West, most people around us aren't Muslim, right? Our schools don't contain Muslim teachers. Even Islam is taught by non-Muslims in many universities, right? Our neighbors might not be Muslim. Not everybody is blessed by living within a Muslim community, a very tight Muslim community. But sometimes I'll tell you what happens, that when you're in a tight Muslim community, you don't go outside of that circle to get to know others, right? So it's important for us then to do what? To go out and to get to know others. Now I hear that in this community, this is something that you do very often. And this is truly a manifestation of our religion. This is truly a manifestation of what Allah wants. This is gratitude for Allah putting these people in our lives. Because I might know something, but someone else might not. And I might not have to go to them and tell them, you know what, you're wrong in your belief. I'm right. No. My actions of kindness, of sincerity, right? That does what? That brings people to Allah Almighty. The most important thing, first and foremost, that they understand that why we do things is because of the fact that we're being sincere to Allah. And by being sincere to them, we're being sincere to Allah. By being sincere to Allah, we're sincere to them. That's why the Imam says, "Man arafa nafsah, arafa rabbah." Right? That's exactly why. So in my daily life, I want you to do this every day. Every day, put in your schedule to meet a new person. It's very tough to do sometimes. Very tough to do sometimes, right? Go out and try to meet a new person. You can't every day, do it every other day. You can't do it every other day, once a week. And meet them for the sincere reason of getting to know about them, what their beliefs are, right? Why is it that they think the way that they think? And ask questions. Imam Ali says, a person who asks a question receives the reward of that question, and what else? The reward of the answer, and the reward of everybody that benefits from that answer. So ask questions. And I want to share with you this also. So we've got two things we need to do. Meet a new person, ask questions, right? And 3, be sincere to them. What I want to do is I would really like to cover some rules of dialogue. This is very important before I end. Prophet Mohammed, so that we give this a practical sense, right? Because a lot of us, when we talk with other people, we tend to be defensive. We don't listen. What we tend to do is we tend to nod. And in our minds, we already have the answer. We're not really listening to what the other person says. So I want to share with you a really important story that I benefited from. And I read a lot of books about, leadership and strategic thinking and all this sort of stuff. And honestly, there's this one book called Al-Ihtijaj. Beautiful book. First chapter. Al-Ihtijaj means the debates. Okay? So the very first chapter in Al-Ihtijaj, the very first story, talks about 5 groups of people that came to the Prophet ﷺ at the advent of the revelation itself. And they all said to him, they said, if you believe in what we believe in, we'll be your allies. If you don't, we'll be your sworn enemies. So what does he say? He says, do you want me to believe in what you believe in without me asking you and knowing what you believe? They said, no, of course. That's fair enough. We'll tell you. So he asks a question. Number 1. This is the Prophet, the seal of the prophets. There is no other person who is better than him on this earth. No other creation that is better than him. But what does he do? First thing. He's sincere to them and he asks a question. He seeks to understand them. Sincerity in seeking to understand the other. And that can only happen by asking a question. So, what's the next thing he does? He closes his blessed mouth and he opens his blessed ears. And what does he do? He listens. Number 3, he listens. Number 4, when they're done, you know what he says to them? He asks another question. Are you done? This is our Prophet. Look at the akhlaq. Look at the sincerity. Right? The next thing is, after they say yes, he says, do you mind if I ask you some questions? Number 5, rules of dialogue. Write these down. You can use them every day. Right? You can use them in conflict resolution. You can read all the books in the world. Right? But this is the best of creations on this earth, telling you the rules of dialogue. Right? First thing, we said what? We said, have sincerity in your heart. Second thing, we said what? We said, ask the question to seek to understand. Number 3, we said, listen. Right? Number 4, we said, ask if they're finished. Number 5, ask if you can ask questions. Number 6, repeat to them what you learned. That's what he did. He repeated to them. And then number 7, he asked them questions from the things he didn't understand. course, Prophet Muhammad understands everything, right? But he asked them why? Because he wanted to show them some issues in their thought. Now, he didn't use his Quran. You know why? Because they didn't believe in Quran. So it's not proof upon them. So don't try to prove your point using things that people don't believe in because they haven't learned it yet. Use their own logic to get them to reach the final conclusion that you want. For example, he spoke to our Christian brothers and sisters. They said to him, we believe that Jesus is the Son of God. He said, okay, well, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, may I ask you a question? So they said yes. He said, why do you believe he's the Son of God? They said, we believe he is the Son of God because his mother didn't have a husband. So we believe that it was God that was with his mother, and so they had Jesus. So he said, okay, may I ask you a question? So you're saying then that Jesus is the Son of God because he didn't have a father, right? They said yes. He said, but what about Adam? Didn't he neither had a father nor a mother? So isn't he more likely to be the Son of God than Jesus? So they said, that's a good point. So some said, you know what? We don't want to deal with you. And some said, that's a very good point. And later, they would believe in what the Prophet had to preach. Our Jewish brothers and sisters, they came to him, they said to him, we believe that Ezra is the son of God, Uzair. So he said to them, let me ask you a question. Do you believe that Ezra is a prophet? They said, no. Do you believe that Ezra spoke to God? They said, no. He said, so why do you believe that he is the son of God? They said, because he revived the Torah. He's the one that had memorized the Torah when it was burned. He's the one that revived it. So he said, okay, let me ask you this. Do you believe that Moses is the prophet of God? They said, yes. He said, do you believe that Moses spoke to God? They said, yes. He said to them then, wouldn't it be more likely that Moses is the son of God, not Ezra? So he got them to think. Right? He instilled that doubt in their heart. And so some of them believed, some of them didn't believe. But you know, at the end, he never argued with them. Never. He was respectful. He maintained their dignity. He showed them that they're worthy of his time by doing those things, those points that we mentioned. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You know, Imam Zainul Abideen, salamullahi alayhi, sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Imam Zainul Abideen, alayhi salam, he has this beautiful book. I don't know if you have it or not in your library. I believe all of us should have our own library, whether it's in our phones or it's in our homes on a shelf. So there's this beautiful book called the Treatise of Rights, Risalatul Huquq. How many of you have it here? Whether on your phone or in your library? How many? 3 people? 4 people? How many sisters? 5, 6, 7? Anybody else? That's it? 7 out of all of us? Okay. So this is your homework too. Pick up Risalatul Huquq. Okay? Every country has a Bill of Rights. Right? Islam has a Bill of Rights. Okay? This Bill of Rights is called the Treatise of Rights. Okay? Who wrote it? Imam Zainul Abideen. So if I want to say that I really want to get to know Imam Hussein, the best way to know Imam Hussein is to look at the works of the child that he raised. Imam Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi. Everything that we need to learn about Imam Hussein is in the words of Zainul Abideen, salamullahi alayhi. In the Treatise of Rights, you know what's the first right that he mentions? The greatest right, he names it, the right of Allah. He says, وَأَمَّا حَقُّ اللَّهِ الْأَكْبَرِ عَلَيْكَ فَأَن تَعْبُدَهُ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِهِ شَيْئًا فَإِذَا فَعَلْتَ ذَلِكَ بِإِخْلَاصٍ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ أَن يَكْفِيَكَ أَمْرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ وَأَن يَحْفَظَ لَكَ مَا تُحِبُّ مِنْهَا. He says, as for Allah's greatest right upon you, for it is that you worship Him in gratitude. لَا تُشْرِكْ بِهِ شَيْئًا. Don't ascribe a partner to Him. For if you do so with sincerity, then Allah will make it mandatory upon Himself that He gives you sufficiency in this world and in the hereafter, and that He preserves for you what you love from this world. Notice everything that we talked about and we proved intellectually and rationally, the Imam mentions in that first right. Sallu ala Muhammad wa